There we go. Welcome everyone to our sixth and last session. We've covered a lot of ground in 6 weeks, and but I think it's been a great exploration so far, and it's not over yet. We have three other very important regions to look at in southern Italy: Basilicata, Campania, and Sardegna. So here we are, our trusty map that's kind of served us throughout this the last month and a half. So we're going to actually start with Basilicata. There's only one wine, but there's a reason. I think you'll see why I'm doing that one first. And you can see Basilicata there, kind of really at the soul of the boot. And it has a very interesting position there. You see that on this side over here on the western side, there's a very small amount of coastal area, and then over here, there's a little bit larger coastal presence, but not that much. So it really is kind of right at the crux of the peninsula, where we have these two peninsulas kind of dividing off, and so it has exposures on both the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Ionian Sea. Here's a close-up look at it, at the wine growing region. Now, this is the grape growing area, and you would say, well, why is it so small? It doesn't really occupy that much of the region, but there's a very good answer for that. Let's see, and most of it has to do with the fact that a lot of it is really dedicated to mountains, to the kind of end, at least on the main Italian peninsula, of the Apennine Mountains. It goes right down there. It occupies most of the territory of Basilicata. Now, here we're looking at the appellation that is going to be, we're really going to be paying most attention to today, because that is the wine that we have from Basilicata. And it's a very important one. It's an Aglianico del Vulture. There are actually two appellations or two subcategories within the Aglianico del Vulture appellation. One is a DOC, and then there is the DOCG, which is a superiore version of the Aglianico del Vulture. Going around in circles there. Okay, so here is an image of the Aglianico grape. This is certainly the most prestigious red grape variety of southern Italy. This is, some people refer to it as the Barolo of the South, just in terms of its prestige and its importance for the area. And I think you could say that it is certainly one of the trio of noble Italian red grape varieties, along with Nebbiolo and Sangiovese. And I think somebody just joined us. Maybe it's Consuelo. If you wouldn't mind just muting your microphone, and a lot of background noise. Thank you so much. So, okay. Right, now we're in Campania, and we're going to see the wine, the Aglianico del Vulture, but I want to see them together with the wines of Campania. So now we're moving over to the west coast, a big coastal area here, a very important region for southern Italy. This is one of the places where the ancient Romans landed on their exploration of Italy, mostly southern Italy, of course. Once they got here, they just dubbed the area Felix Campanium, happy fields, because they looked around and they saw that this area was very fertile and very suited to cultivation of grapevines. And of course, along with the grapevines that were already there, they brought their own sort of wine culture that had been very highly developed. They met the ancient Greeks and the Etruscan remnants that had been down there. And so once again, we found, we see this meeting. We talked about the meeting of the Etruscans and the ancient Greeks who spent time in this area, and also the Romans too. The ancient Romans expanded their empire down to the south as well as up to the north, and so they kind of inherited this already composite wine growing culture of both Etruscan influence and Greeks who brought their own kind of wine culture with them. It's a pretty big region, and it's very diverse. There's a big coastal area, as I mentioned, as you go inwards, you go up into the hills and then up into the mountains right in the middle, the Apennines. So very diverse in terms of altitude, and we have the continent, really more continental soil as you get into the mountains, and more obviously more maritime, Mediterranean along the coast. But in addition to that, there's a lot of volcanic areas, a lot of volcanic events that have taken place here. So on all different levels, there are some volcanoes that are very much alive, like Vesuvius, and some of the other volcanic areas off in the sea. We saw some last week with Sicily too, of course, Etna and Stromboli there. So right in this, this kind of southern hook there, a lot of volcanic activity. So here there are live volcanoes. There are extinct volcanoes. Monte Volture in Basilicata is an extinct volcano. And then there are dormant volcanoes. So there are a number of areas in Campania that they're not active, but they're not extinct either, because you see smoke coming up and steam, and there's a lot of heat and things happening under the earth, the surface of the earth. So they're still there. They're dormant. They're not erupting now, but they're certainly not extinct. Um, another very interesting thing here is that there are a lot of native varieties here, possibly because of all the influences of the ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Etruscans. But a lot of very interesting, very ancient native varieties. We'll be looking at a number of them. Aglianico certainly is one of them. Fiano, Greco, Falangina, Piedirosso, very ancient varieties, and they're really native to this area in particular. And then you see them in other places too, but this is really their home turf. This is what Campania looks like from the air as a kind of topographical map here. And you can certainly see what I was talking about, the different types of terrain that are there, from the coastal areas that are green, up into the hills, which are kind of beige and white, and then into the mountains, which are brown. So this really defines the growing areas. And you see Avellino, a very important growing area there. Benevento, Caserta too is a great area. Some very interesting wine growing out there. What we're really looking at primarily right now is the Aglianico, and so there is Benevento. This is where one of the types of Aglianico that we're going to look at comes from. And then there's another one here in Avellino. So remember these. And if you can remember the previous slide in Basilicata, where there was an image of the area of Monte Volture, because that's what we're going to be comparing. So we have there are three principal biotypes of Aglianico, and they're all right here in the Classico book. So it's a great opportunity to be able to compare them. Now, what do I mean by a biotype? There's a little bit of controversy in the wine community about what a biotype is. Some people just refer to these as clones, but to me, they're really not clones. Clones is, for me and for many people, is certain vines of a given genetic biotype that people select intentionally, and then they propagate them either in a nursery or they do it in their own vineyards. So they're selected vines of a certain type that that just perform better than the others, and so people want to propagate those grapes, and either commercially or just for their own use. A biotype is a grape variety it has this great varieties that have the same, actually the same variety, but they express themselves in notably different ways in different places. So these three are biotypes. Genetically, they're exactly the same, or I mean, the vast majority of the genetic markers is common to all of them, but they're very different. And in some cases, we saw that before. We saw it in Tuscany, where people called the Sangiovese grape Brunello in one area, Morellino in another, um, Prugnolo Gentile in Montepulciano. So, and they're all the same grape. They're all Sangiovese, but they really, they're so different in terms of how they perform that people thought they were just different grape varieties, and they gave them a different name. They were familiar with Sangiovese, but they didn't really think that it was a Sangiovese. They called it Brunello or one of the other names. So here we have three biotypes, genetically the same, but in three different areas that really have different, they demonstrate different characteristics. So the first one is from Basilicata. It is from this ancient extinct volcano called Monte Volture. And and this is, I mean, in many ways, Basilicata is a great region. I know we have one of our participants has relatives there, and it's a great region. But this is really their sort of most important appellation, and kind of really puts them on the viticultural map in many ways. So this is the Alianico del Monte Volture, and it comes from, it's made by a group. This is the winery is called Vigneti del Vulture, but it belongs to a group that we saw before, Fantini Farnese group in Abruzzo, and they have estates throughout Italy, in Puglia, Campania, Basilicata, this one, as well as Sicily and Toscana. So we've encountered them before in our explorations here. These wines, they're all 100% Aglianico, wherever they come from, that is a requirement. These vineyards are very much in the vicinity of Monte Volture. The wine growing area really surrounds the mountain. There are kind of two different parts of it. Some are a little bit lower in altitude and a little bit more distant, but they still have obviously the volcanic influence because of airborne uh, volcanic material that travels quite a ways, and this is not that far. It's in the lower slopes of the former volcano. So the soil here is rich in clay, calcium, nitrogen, and of course tuff, which is one of the volcanic materials. The vines are quite old, 70 to 80 years old. We've seen that before. We saw it a lot in Sicily, because in volcanic soils, which tend to be very gravelly and loose, the aphid cannot exist. They can't create tunnels going down to the roots, which is where they really do their harm. It can kill vines that way. So here they're not able to do that, and you see a lot of older vines in this area, just like we saw in Sicily. Here the fermentation is quite long. They say 25 to 30 days, followed by 24 months in new small barrels. And the alcohol is about 14 and a half. Going over to Campania in the Torasi area, which is in the province of Avellino, which in the area of Campania, this area was historically, in kind of classical times, referred to as Irpinia. And guess what? Most people in the area who live there still refer to it as that. Yes, it's in Campania. They're in the province of Avellino, which is named after one of the principal towns there. But they really refer to it as Irpinia. They're Irpinese. The winery here is Vinosia, and I should say Vinosia. This is a Torasi DOCG called San Andrea, and this is a DOCG appellation, Torasi. 100% Aglianico di Torasi. And, people usually specify this is Aglianico, yes, but it is the Aglianico from the Torasi area. Of course, it has to be. The vineyard is fairly small, 6 hectares, so about 450 meters above sea level. And here too, we have volcanic soil mixed in with some limestone and clay. Uh, and this one spends about 14 months in French barriques. Apparently, they're using a lot of barrique and even new barrique in Campania right now. Then going over just really across the border, a little bit of the provincial border, still in Campania, to the Benevento area. Uh, Alianico del Taberno, another very important appellation, another the really prestigious appellations for Alianico specifically. This area is referred to as Sannio. This is the ancient name for this area, the Sannio area. And this is named after an ancient tribe who inhabited the area called in English we say Sanites. In Italian, it's probably Saniti. And here there are, we'll see some other wines from Fontana Vecchia shortly, but we have 3 different Alianicos from them. So there is what we could call a classic Alianico del Taburno, DOCG. Um, and then there is a Reserva called Grave Mora. And finally, there's another Reserva called Vigna Catarate. So here, an interesting thing, one classic one, 2 reservas. One of the reservas is a single vineyard from the Vigna Catarate. It's just the name of a specific vineyard. Um, most things are common between the 3. They're all produced by Fontana Vecchia Winery, which was founded in the 19th century, so it's fairly old, by the Rillo family. In the Contrada, which is a name of a community within the area of Benevento, the city that gives the province its name. They have 20 hectares overall of vineyard, and they only really work with typical varieties. We'll see some others in the next slide. All of them are 100% Alianico del Taberno, of course. The soil is pretty much the same, clay with lime and marl outcrops. What really makes the difference here is the aging regimen in the single vineyard. So the first, the basic one is aged for 12 months in French barriques. The Reserva, 18 months, so a year and a half, and then some time in bottle, of course. That's the same amount of time for the third one, except that here you have the same vinification procedure, but the grapes come from a specific vineyard within their holding within this area. Kind of subtle distinctions, but I'm sure that they would be very apparent in the glass. Between the Alianico del Taburno and the 2 Reservas, you would see probably much more complexity because of the additional aging. The fact that the grapes and probably, if someone is going to make a Reserva version, they select the best grape varieties for the Reservas because they're going to undergo a longer aging period in some kind of material wooden vessel that's going to permit some respiration of the wine, micro oxygenation through the wood, and in barriques because the wood is much thinner than in a large cask. This oxidative interchange is how shall I put it? I don't want to say accelerated, but it's more intense. It's more free flowing because the wood is much thinner. And I mean, you can't see the air flowing back and forth. Of course, it's very subtle, even in a barrique. But because the wood is thinner, and if you're using new barrique, the pores are wide open. There tends to be much more of this exchange going on than in a large cask of thick wood that's used for quite an extended period of time, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or longer. So very interesting kind of nuances of difference between these 3 wines from the same producer and the same grape variety. Now we have three other wines from them that are Um, Very interesting. I'll start with the one in the middle. So this is Alianico del Taburno, DOCG, from the same area, same soil makeup, maybe altitude a little bit lower. Um, this is a rosato, totally permitted within the appellation. Before we started today, we were talking a little bit about Prosecco, DOC, and the fact that they're going to be launching probably this spring their Rosé Prosecco for the first time ever. Quite controversial in the greater Prosecco region, especially in the Prosecco Conegliano Valdobbiadene area. But here it's it's part of their tradition there. So as you can see, a much shorter fermentation period. This is all done in stainless steel tanks, and essentially there's some time in bottle, but there's no wood. They don't really want the wood, especially of a new barrique. Uh, they would not want the wood to really interfere with the freshness of the wine and the sort of clarity of the fruit that's coming across. Um, and of course, for a rosato, there's a very brief skin contact, and I would venture to say that in this case, since they also make three other Alianicos, what they probably do here is it was not mentioned in their material, but they probably perform a salasso technique, which salasso means bleeding in English. We say where you have red grapes, they're crushed up, they are macerating together, they're put in a container, in a fermentation container, and in this case, stainless steel, and they begin the maceration, but it's a very short period of skin contact. After that, they withdraw some of the liquid. It's not even necessarily wine yet. It's probably not grape must either because it's already probably begun its fermentation, but it's somewhere in between grape juice and wine. They'll remove a certain portion of that liquid to make their rosato. And then the rest of the wine is going to will probably continue its fermentation and be much more intense and much more concentrated. And then they would probably use that as a blending material in with one of the other Alianicos. And it would be either the first one or the second one, because chances are the Alianico that's used for their rosato is not the one that they use for their single vineyard. So that's and that would be, I mean, that would be the fourth in this lineup of Fontana Vecchia Alianicos. It would be great to try the Rosato first, and then the Alianico del Taburno DOCG, and then the Reserva, and then the Single Vineyard. You would really see a progression and four different faces of the same, I would call it a noble grape variety. There's another thing that they do. They work largely with native grape varieties, but there is this Orazio wine, and this is named after not the father, not the founder of the winery, because it was founded quite a long time ago. But Orazio is the father that is still active in the winery today. He's getting a little bit older now, but so this wine is named for him. I'm not sure whether it was his idea or not, but 60% Alianico del Taberno mixed with 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. Same soil makeup, clay with marl outcroppings, and about 18 months in French barrique, so the same kind of aging regimen, but obviously a different flavor profile coming from Cabernet Sauvignon. Also, probably notably darker than the other 100% Alianico versions. Then from Fontana Vecchia, last is a white wine made from a very old native grape variety of this area, Falanghina del Sannio. And remember, Sannio is the area that of Benevento, generally speaking, but it's really referred to still today as Sannio, the ancient name for it, for the area. This is 100% Falanghina. Once again, the soil makeup is identical for all of these wines, which makes it very interesting because you can really see, you take that out of the picture of variables. So all the same soil, in many cases, the same grape varieties with the Aglianico. Here you have 100% Falangina, so you can see how this grape variety shows in this environment. Um, and it's very straightforward. Some people will age the Falangina a little bit in oak. I don't think they do because they didn't say that they did. I'm not sure, but so this would be, and it doesn't need it. It can, the Falangina tends to be pretty angular and medium plus bodied all on its own. It doesn't need the support of wood to kind of give it that tannin structure. But it can take it, but it doesn't need it. So this uh, probably is a very straightforward one to really show the Falangina grape variety itself. Maybe gets a little, slight bit of wood probably from used barrels if they're using them at all. Otherwise, stainless steel. Now we move into Sardinia. We talked about Sicily last week, the largest island in the Mediterranean. Sardinia is the second. And it actually it has it faces three different sub areas of the Mediterranean Sea. There's the Adriatic, the Ligurian, and then just to the west is it's all the Mediterranean, but is what many people refer to as the Sardinian Sea. Here is the topographical version of it, and you can see here too a lot of mountainous areas. These many people refer to the Sardinians as mountain people. They do a lot of sheep herding, a lot of sheep up there and up in the higher mountain areas. A lot of pecorino sardo, one of their great cheeses. But so you see a lot of these areas are there's a big diversity of plain areas, which are the green, the green areas on the map. Hills, which are the beige areas, and then really the brownish areas are the mountain peaks. Because of the prevalence of the mountains, you see here too, it's very isolated on the map where vines are actually planted, and that just has to do with the altitude and the mountainous areas that you can't grow grapes at a very high altitude in a place where it's just rock and without enough soil. So very, once again, very kind of spotted area. You see certain areas mostly on the coast. There's some inland as well, but for the most part, they're coastal areas. And we're going to be looking primarily down here in the southern section on the Salento. It's not really a peninsula, but it's sort of the Salento area down in the southern part there. You see Cagliari in the middle. And we're going to be looking at two grape varieties, Vermentino and Cananao. These are really the flag bearers of Sardinia as far as wine production. Vermentino Sardinia is one of the areas where Vermentino shows very, very well. And it's interesting. It's because otherwise on the Italian peninsula, there is some Vermentino in Tuscany and the coastal areas. And in Liguria. Liguria, there's Vermentino, there's also Pigatto. But so it's really right around the area of Liguria and Tuscany in the northern part there. And in Sardinia, they have a lot of Vermentino planted. It's really one of their most important grape varieties. The other one is Cananao, and this is essentially the same grape variety as Garnacha, or as is called in Spain, or Grenache, as it's known in France. Here it's Cananao. And there was the reason why it's here is very clear. There was a presence of of Spanish people who occupied the island for a while and actually had a big influence on the wine growing here. There's Carignan is also planted here, and some other grape varieties that were probably brought over by the Spaniards. There's also, I mean, almost nobody knows this, but there is also Nebbiolo here, a very small kind of colony of Nebbiolo in the northern part of the island in the area of Gallura, which is a very important area for Vermentino. It's Sardinia's only DOCG, Vermentino di Gallura, and there is a long tradition of planting Nebbiolo there, going back at least 200 to 250 years, something like that. And they say that there was, I think I mentioned way back at the beginning, we were talking about Piemonte and how the House of Savoy was really kind of in the forefront of the Italian reunification. Under first there was King Carlo Alberto of the Savoia, then the first king of the constitutional monarchy of the reunified Italy was Emanuele Vittorio Emanuele the second. Sorry, I started out with the wrong name. Vittorio Emanuele the second was the son of Carlo Alberto, and he was the first king of the unified Italy. And the way that the House of Savoy was able to do this was by acquiring a kingdom, and it happened to be Sardinia as well as the two Sicilies. They also were able to acquire that. But it was really the kingdom of Sardinia that gave them the possibility of creating a kingdom in Italy for the entire country. So then it became this sort of constitutional monarchy under the king, but it was not ruled solely by the king. It was a constitutional monarchy, so there was a whole government of advisors as well. There, and by the way, in Nebbiolo and Sardinia, there's only 10 or 12 producers that make it, and the struggling consortio. But interesting that it's still there after all this time. So here we're going to be looking at 4 wines, and they are made up of these 2 very important varieties. Now, both of these are what we call regional appellations. So Vermentino and Cananao can be grown and used to make wine under the Vermentino di Sardegna or Cananao di Sardegna, anywhere, any growing area, registered growing area on the island of Sardinia. So it's a regional appellation. So let's take a look at 2 of these. Vermentino di Sardegna, Villa Soleris, is 85% Vermentino, which is what is the minimum that is required. You can use 15% of another grape variety, and in this case, it's Nuragus, a very interesting kind of peripheral but probably native variety of Sardinia. Nuragus, Nuraghi is the name of a kind of old ancient structure created by made of stones. And so this grape variety is named after that. The vineyards are located in 5 towns within the lower Sulcis area. And there is, I mentioned Carignano, there's a Carignano del Sulcis, which is grown in this area. But these vineyards happen to be located in the same place for Vermentino. The soil here is very sandy. It's fairly low altitude. It's out on the southern part near the coast, and so it makes sense that there would be sand there as well as clay. All stainless steel fermentation. What they do here, however, which is what many people do who don't want to use a barrel to age the wine and have it not necessarily take on flavor or toastiness of the wood, unless it's a new barrique. You just get this sort of kind of settled quality and a slight micro oxygenation, which helps it breathe and develop. but sometimes that can interfere with the sort of just the flavor profile and aromatic profile of the grape variety itself. So this is all stainless steel fermentation, but as we've seen before, they let it stay on the lees, the fine lees, for several months before bottling, and that just gives it a little touch of kind of creaminess. These are dead yeast particles that have fallen to the bottom. But just like in champagne, they have a very beneficial characteristic of kind of adding this sort of kind of creamy character to the wine. It's very subtle because this is only a few months, and if you really are want to get the what we call autolysis, this is where the what happens when these dead yeast particles break down into the wine. In champagne, or in the classic method of making a sparkling wine, they're really looking. They do extended lees aging during after the second fermentation, and in some cases, and for champagne, it has to be at least 15 months. For a regular one, for a vintage, at least 3 years. In many cases, people will let the wine sit on the lees in the bottle for 5, 10 years or longer to get this autolytic character, we call it. In that case, that's where you get in a classic method sparkling wine, this kind of bready, yeasty quality that is a big part of what makes a great classic method sparkling wine great. Is this leesy character? Here, we're not getting that. In fact, you might not really even know that it was there, except if you compared it perhaps to the Pala Vermentino di Sardegna, uh, which is also 100% stainless steel uh, vinified. You might find that this one has a little bit more kind of body and or softness, or a hint of lactic. Um, uh, I wouldn't say lactic acid, but this almost kind of slight milkiness, but and very, very subtle, believe me. But just in comparison to another wine made from a Vermentino, in a kind of interesting wine growing area. This one rich in fossils, so you're going to get this kind of shelly character, pronounced acidity. Would be you might notice a difference there, very subtle. This so the I Fiori from Pala Winery is a single vineyard. Vermentino. The vineyard is called Quabilis, and we'll see this again. They use kind of a different vineyards for different grape varieties and different wines. These vines are 45 years old, so very mature vines. And now I should say the next three wines are by all from the same winery, Pala, founded in 1950. Now I think they're in their third or fourth generation. They are once again, in Sannio, in the province of Benevento. So now we have two Cananao di Sardegna. They're both made from 100% Cananao. The vineyard makeup is a little bit different. The first one, I Fiori, involves three different vineyard sites, 40-year-old vines. The soil is pretty much the same. The vinification, the age. Well, sometimes people say the aging. It's really more the maturation period following fermentation is different. And I would say that's probably what makes the difference between these two kind of now, even more than the vineyard selection or the age of the vines. Only 5 years difference in age. Here, the first one, I Fiori, is matured in underground cement tanks for about 6 months, and then in bottle for 2 to 3 months. The other Cananao di Sardegna, DOC, spends 12 months in 3,000-liter casks of French oak, and then 3 months in stainless steel after that. So, two very valid ways of allowing the wine to mature. One in underground tanks that we talked about a little bit last week, they do allow a very, very gentle, slow micro-oxygenation. Now here, one of the really interesting things is that they're underground. So you still get that, but there's a big difference between having a micro-oxygenation between something, the liquid inside a container and the air outside it, even if it's in an enclosed winery. There's a big difference between that and wine that is in an underground container, where it's still having this this sort of gentle interplay with between the inside and the outside, but outside of the tank is the earth, the ground. So a very different maturation process compared to wood. Now these are 3,000 liter casks, so they're not huge barrels, but they're a good size, certainly compared to a barrique. So a different aging regimen, and would be interesting to compare those two side by side. And that is it for our wines today. For our sixth session, Campania, Basilicata, and Sardegna. And are there any questions?
Alan, I'll jump in because I want to clear. I think you you missed out on something and possibly made a mistake.
Okay.
The second canon now is a Reserva. Okay, that was you know, if you go back to your slide, yeah.
Let's go here. Yes.
So the one that ages in oak cask is actually a Reserva. Okay, just to mention. And you throw me a curveball here. Salvatore Pala in the Sanio area of Benevento. Did they start it in Campania and
moved? Oh no! I don't think.
I don't think so either. But I was like, maybe I don't know something that I don't know. So I just.
Well, and okay, I will check that out. It would not really make
any sense.
Not really make sense. No.
Yeah. Okay.
But I will check that out. And what was the other one about was the second Canonau?
Yes, the second Canonau, there is I Fiori, which let's call it the classic. And then the second Canonau, then you have a Canonau di Sardegna is actually a Reserva. Okay.
So I'm sorry, the second one that is aged in the underground cement tanks. What so it's not, what is that? Is it a Reserva or
no, that's correct. The one in the cement tank, it's correct. Yeah. The other one.
Yes.
12 months, 3,000 liter. That's the Reserva.
Yes. Okay, great. All right.
And since then I have the microphone. What defines noble for a grape? You said we have three noble grapes: Aglianico, Sangiovese, and Nebbiolo, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So why do we classify it as a noble? Or we call them a noble?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's very subjective in this case. Now, I'll say that when you're talking about noble grapes, there are some. There's a group of what people consider to be noble grape varieties, which it has 8 or 12 or 16, depending on who you're asking. But these are international varieties, which kind of seems counterintuitive to me. Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, things like that. So, but there is a group that are called the noble grape varieties. In certain areas, like in Alsace, you have the noble grapes, or 4 noble grapes, of which those are the only ones you can use for a wine called Gentil and things like that. So there are some groups that have the name noble grapes. In this case, we say noble. It's very subjective, and people use that for them. In this case, because opposite of what the official category of noble grapes is, because they don't grow everywhere, because they really reflect they portray a certain wine growing area or region in a very on a very high level. It just has to do with the nobility of the wine in the sense of the quality and the prestige of the wine that it can make, the wines that it can make. And that's really, you know, here we say like the trio of noble grape varieties of Italy. There are many, many great grape varieties of Italy, but these are ones that have really sort of stood out largely because of wines like Barolo with Nebbiolo, Brunello di Montalcino with Sangiovese, and Torrasi with Aglianico that have really, according to many people, are on a very high scale of prestige and quality. And maybe also ageability. I mean, to me, I would say that it would be hard to have a truly noble grape that was not age worthy, meaning that it had the capacity, the potential to really evolve very positively over a long period of time. But it's a very subjective term.
Thank you, Alan. Also, from the chat, Michael is asking, do you know what size are the cement tanks then Mala's using? Are they...
I don't, and they didn't really specify that. Usually cement tanks are fairly large. That was one of the advantages to them. It could be a large, you can make quite a large container. You know, they tend to be even 5,000 liters is tends to be kind of on the small side. Usually they're 10, 20,000 liters and up. Some of them are quite big, but they did not really specify. And you know, I don't know how many of them they have, how long they've been there for. In order to really fill a lot of very large tanks like that, it takes a lot of wine. So either they're kind of on the smaller side of that, or they don't have many of them.
Thank you, Alan.
Sure.
Anybody else that has a question, please jump in.
I have a question. I think someone might have texted this in another meeting. Is there any website that you guys use to order wine in case you can't find it locally?
I don't really have any sites per se, but you know, there are a lot. There are a couple sites like wine.com, Vivino that I know is pretty, it's national. So they tend to have a large stock of different wines. I don't really use them that much myself. Dario, I don't think you know, because Dario drinks his own wine, so he doesn't have to order too much.
No, yeah, because we really don't go into the retail side to the consumer because it's illegal for us here in Arizona. I really don't know. I mean, I think, like you said, wine.com is probably one of the largest one. For referrals, sometimes I use K&L, which is a large retailer in California, but you know, they're very knowledgeable. They had a huge selection. I got, and actually know St. Clair there, but yeah, I would say that's, you know, we not really knowing much. Probably, you know, Scott, Total Wine. You know, Total Wine also has a very huge presence on the web. So yeah, I think if I were you, probably that's where I would start.
Okay.
I would start at Total Wine. Okay.
So another question I have. So Alan.
Yes.
Do you give wine tours of wineries in Italy? If we were to come to visit, can we reach out, contact you, and get a tour?
Well, I used to do that a lot when I was living there, but I'm living in the United States now, so it's a little bit harder, even if it wasn't for the pandemic. If you want to fly me over there, and if we can travel, sure, it would be great. But I'm not living there. I've been back in the States.
I thought you were there. For some reason, I thought you were there.
Well, I am in my heart and spirit, but
Okay,
but I have a young daughter here, so I'm very much here.
okay.
But and I think there are a number of people that do that, but I can't really vouch for any of them.
Okay.
And no, I mean it's gonna be a while in any case, I think, before we're able to do that. Now wineries are like restaurants in Italy. They're really they're functioning, but they can't have any visitors.
Right, right.
And it's hard. It's even hard to move from one town to another town without a very significant reason, like work or food or medical care. Otherwise, and they're really enforcing that as well. So it's tricky.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. But I mean, it's great to talk about wine and it's great to drink it. If whenever you have an opportunity, you have to go there because wine is is so much about the place that it comes from, and in many cases, not just the region, but the specific area. And looking at the vines and seeing their exposition and what the soil is like and what the breezes are like and how they're handled gives a lot of insight into that.
Well, I have to say that I've been to Italy all my life, every year. My mother was going every year for as long as I can remember. And after this class, I have a different set of glasses on that I didn't realize before.
No, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And guess what? The glasses, once you get them on there, they're going to stay on because there's always something to learn about wine, and especially in Italy because I think I mentioned at the very beginning, it's so rich, it's so complex. There's so many different grape varieties. There's so many different uh, wine making traditions there that there's always something new to learn, which I like. I think it keeps us all kind of engaged and invigorated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else want to jump in as a question?
Alan, just real quick, I hope this isn't a stupid question, but you're referring to the different biotypes of Aglianico.
Yep.
When we're talking to our clients about Sangiovese in Tuscany, you got Sangiovese Grosso, Gentile Morellino. Are those clones or is that more of a situation that you were talking about with Aglianico?
Well, it depends on which definition you're using. As I mentioned, it's a little bit controversial. Certain groups don't really, or individuals don't really make the same distinction. But for me, a clone is where you propagate. You make a selection of a certain vine because it shows certain characteristics. And now you take a vineyard that has hundreds of different hundreds or thousands of grapevines in it. Each one of them, they're undergoing small mutations all the time, or they respond a little bit differently. They're the same vine, right? But you have some that are a little bit more, they just produce better grapes. They're more vigorous. The grapes are better for some reason. Farmers, I mean, this is ancient. Farmers will say, oh, this one is really good. I'm going to select this one to propagate in my vineyard. And so they'll either, in the olden days, they used to take a branch and bury it underground, and then it would set roots and start to grow up, and then they would cut it off and it would be a different vine. Or else they would make a selection of a particular vine and graft it. And then they would keep doing that. They would make, they would select what were the best performing vines in their vineyard and propagate them. So that's a clone. When you make an intentional selection and a grafting, and then you put it into commercial productivity, that to me is really a clone. Biotypes are a little bit more general of a category. So you have the same grape variety that expresses itself in noticeably different ways in different areas, even within the same general region. That's really a biotype. And you have, you like I said, I mean, if you tasted a Brunello di Montalcino and a Morellino, you would see a difference. Even on the same playing field, You might have to, it might have to be a Rosso di Montalcino because you have a different aging regimen for a Brunello than for Morellino di Scansano, even a Reserva. But so, and they look different, and a lot of that has to do with the soil that they've been growing in for hundreds of years, and the exposition and the altitude and the proximity to the coast or a large body of water. So all of these things make a difference on how a grapevine develops without changing its genetic makeup. So that's a biotype. When you have the same grape variety, the same grapevine that's been planted in different areas for an extended period of time and is developed differently over time without really changing its genetic makeup. Whereas a clone is a selected vine or vines that are then grafted and used to plant more vines, to make grafts that then you can plant. And that's what nurseries do. That's what they do all the time. They make clones, and each of the, you can go, I mean, if you were a wine grower, you could go to a nursery and you say, oh, I want to plant Nebbiolo. Well, which one do you want? They have many different clones of Nebbiolo that show different characteristics. But they're produced, they're in production, and they're being cloned all the time. They're just being propagated.
Thank you.
Any
Okay.
other questions? I mean, that was a good question. What is the difference? What is a biotype? And I think if you're out in the field and you're talking to to customers, you don't necessarily need to use that word, but you can say, if you're working with the classical book, for example, and you have Chianti Classico, and you have Brunello, and you have a Morellino, and you have a Vino Nobile. Yeah, they're all Sangiovese, but they're fundamentally very different because of the way that grape variety expresses itself in these different areas, and has historically for a long period of time. Which is why Morellino is a local word for Sangiovese, because they thought it was a different grape.
So what you're saying, Alan, basically is for the past 19 years, 20 plus years that I've been in the business, I'm just being lying to my customers no, but by ignorance, because like I always say, well, this is a different clone of Sangiovese.
No, I wouldn't. There are some people that don't really distinguish between biotype and clone.
But I think your explanation should make that distinction, because
Well,
exactly
think,
like you said,
yeah, I think
clone is you take it from that vine and you reproduce it, which clone, that's what clone is,
And both clones and biotypes have one very important thing in common: the same genetic makeup. So they're genetically speaking, they're the same grape variety. And so they have that in common, and therefore, yeah, okay, it can be interchangeable for some people, because clone, biotype, they're both grapevines that have with a different name perhaps, but they have the same genetic makeup to them. The real difference between them, and I think it's significant, is at least to me, is the intentionality of it. With a clone, that is something that people are doing. Clones they don't happen by themselves. When you make a clone, you're making a selection. If you're doing it just in your vineyard, this is how people used to, farmers would just sort of, if they had an empty space, they wanted to plant another vine, they call it layering. They take this, one of the canes, and they bury it underground, and they produce another one. Or like I said, they do a head graft. They cut off a branch with a bud on it, and they graft it onto to a vine. It's a rootstock that's already in the ground. Maybe they just want to change the grape variety. You can do that. So but making an intentional choice to select one particular example of a given grape variety, I think that's important. And then it goes into production, into commercial production, or into someone's own production in their vineyard site, which is really different than a grapevine just kind of having been brought over to a different area indiscriminately not even knowing what it was necessarily. And over time, having it, people cultivate it in that particular area, and then they just, it demonstrates different characteristics, even though it's the same. So I think it does make a big difference, and there's a distinction between doing something intentionally, like making clones intentionally, and just having a grape variety develop over a period of time in a different area and express itself very differently. So, I mean, it's not mistaken to refer to them as clones, but I think that's it gives a different insight into the whole thing.
Yeah, because I mean, again, when you talk about, something being from, let's say, again, Brunello and Vino Nobile, same varietal, but the fact that it's a different soil, microclimate, and everything, the vine adapt, to that particular situation,
Right.
and then gives a different flavors.
Absolutely, and just like I said, it has to do with the intention, the specific intention. Nobody, you call, okay, you say it's a clone of Sangiovese. Nobody, went to the middle of the Chianti Classico area and cut a vine and said, I'm gonna make a clone and I'm gonna plant it here and call it Brunello instead. I mean,
Right.
it's just something that happens spontaneously.
Right.
So I think, but it's just, and I think, getting back to the original question, I think there's a distinction there. It's a very subtle distinction, and it's an interesting conversation, but you would have to make the call whether it's useful to your client or not. If it helps, what's gonna really help them understand the difference and the connection between Brunello or Morolino and Sangiovese. That's all.
Right. Got it. Anybody else want to jump in?
This is a question for Dario. I don't know if everybody here is from Phoenix, but what is the region for the next wine dinner at Marcelino's?
I have no clue. I don't even know if he's got something planned.
Oh, it was on the website.
Oh, it was. I guess I'm not involved.
Yeah, it is. Your name is on there.
I am? Well, maybe they'll let me know sometime.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Joyce. I'll find out. I'll find out and let you know. But does it say even when by any chance? You know when? Do you know when? The one?
Yeah, March 2nd.
Okay. I'll find out. And I'll let you know.
Is everybody in this group from Phoenix? In the Zoom meeting?
I believe, I believe we all are. Yes. Yes, because we're a combination of Classico and Italian Association. So yeah, we're all from Phoenix. Okay. Well, Alan, I think we're good. So I wanted to thank you, for everything that you've done. It's been very, very interesting and informative. I know my guys definitely have taken advantage of those classics, me personally also. And like I said, I want to thank you again for everything you've done. It's been great.
Thank you, Dario, for having me, and thank you all for your attention and your patience. Sometimes we talked about a lot of things, a lot of different wines, and it was I really enjoyed it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Be well. And
Yeah.
happy springtime.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ci sentiamo presto.
Senz'altro. Wait a second.
Okay.
Hold on. I got a question from Michael. What did it say? Okay, no, it's just basically thanking everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.